the Sound Like Us podcast, where we get the bedroom rock stars out of the bedroom and out into the world to hopefully get them the recognition they deserve. During the interview, we get to know an artist by asking about how important music is to them, from how their early lives shaped the musician they became, and their first taste of live music to their first foray into writing and producing and what they have planned for the future. Please like, follow, share, subscribe in all the usual places: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, Instagram and YouTube. Big thank you to everyone that's done so already. Please spread the word far and wide to your friends and family, and even that annoying prick you sit next to at work. If you like the podcast, please subscribe on whatever podcast platform you use. This helps give the algorithm a big old slap on the chops and gets those musicians even more of the exposure they deserve. If you're a musician, singer-songwriter, rapper, producer, DJ, MC, or even, God forbid, a drummer, and you fancy joining me on the podcast, please don't hesitate to get in touch and we'll get you on. We are also proud to announce that we've partnered up with our mates at East London Recordings. East London Recordings is an independent record label run by independent artists for independent artists. East London Recordings has grown into an influential label committed to helping artists realise their full potential. We will be working with East London Recordings by interviewing their artists on the podcast, giving them more exposure on their background, what inspires them, where they are performing, and what music they have coming out in the near future. There will be many more things to listen out and watch out for, so keep those eyes out and ears peeled. Thanks for listening and enjoy the show. Welcome to the Sound Like Us podcast, and today is a slightly different episode as our guest is Paul Loeb, founder and CEO of DropTrack, an AI-powered music platform designed especially for independent artists. Paul, a warm South London welcome to today on this very warm evening. How are you doing today?
Thanks, Martin. I'm doing great. I'm here in sunny Los Angeles and happy to be with you here.
Great. Happy to have you on. Right. So let's start by having you giving us a brief little background of yourself and DropTrack.
For sure. So I would say first and foremost, I am a musician myself. So I grew up playing the piano. I learned how to play the trumpet and the clarinet. I played in the marching band at my college. Music is a big part of my life. And I started producing music shortly after college, which led me to start a record label to release my own music and also those of friends and other artists I knew that had really good music, but they just didn't know how to get it out into the world or share it with more people. And I have a background, myself in technology. I've been a programmer from a very early age. And when I first got into this, record label business and deciding to promote my music and get it heard and, the other artists around me, we realized that one of the challenges is how do you actually do that? How do you, cut through the noise of all the thousands of great other songs that are put out on Spotify or, Apple Music at the time,
Sure.
Every day. And what we did as an independent label, and what a lot of labels still do today, is you hire a consultant, basically. This is like a club DJ promoter or a radio DJ promoter, and they have their list of DJs and they promote your music on their behalf. Sometimes they follow up, sometimes they don't. A lot of times it felt like throwing money down a black hole. And I thought, okay, there's got to be a better way. Like I can use my programming engineering background in order to find a way to solve this without paying this, huge consultant expense. And that's how my company DropTrack was born. I built a tool for myself to use as an independent record label to promote our music, get it heard by DJs, get it played on the radio, get heard by a wider audience. And it worked. I was able to use my technology to get my songs on MTV or on Comedy Central or, in a Disney movie. And by using this technology, I thought, oh, okay, there's something here. It would be valuable to other labels, other independent artists as well. And so that's when the idea of DropTrack as a product was born. And I've really just been growing it since then, learning every step of the way from what the music industry partners that we work with, what they need, what they're looking for, whether it's, getting your music on a Spotify playlist that's really popular, or getting your music in the background of a Netflix show, or getting signed to a record label. These are all different things that, my company DropTrack now can help independent artists with. We're primarily a technology-based platform, but we also do have a high touch, done for you service. We will actually act almost as if we're a PR agent or a manager to help spread the word and get you heard by more folks. So I know I just went through a whole lot, but happy to dive into any more about myself or the company.
I think that's kind of the dream idea a lot of musicians probably would wish they would have had,
all this work I've got to do to put my music out there, get people to listen to it, and it's just so much work for so little return.
Definitely. I think one of the things that I found is, there's a lot of people in this industry that make all kinds of claims. And like I said earlier, it can feel like throwing money down a black hole. We take a very different approach of, providing transparency and software that shows who's listening to your music, who's engaging with it, how far into the song are they listening, are they downloading it and sharing it with people. These are signals that you can use to improve your marketing or plan a tour around where people are, responding to your music.
Amazing. Right, let's crack on with the questions. So, your background in music, like you were saying a bit before, started playing piano, clarinet, and later trumpet in the USC Trojan Marching Band. Was it kind of clear to you back then that music was an industry you saw yourself working in, or was it something that kind of came gradually?
That's a good question. I have always, like I said, been passionate about music. It's been something that's been a big part of my life. And, someone at some point gave me the advice that, you should try to do something for work that you're passionate about so that it doesn't feel like working. And, to some extent, I have carried that mantra. But when I studied in school and in university, I studied business and music industry. And, one of the experiences that I had in that class was putting on a show, a concert at a warehouse venue downtown. And our professor came out and was dancing, but we had to learn how to, book talent and how to hire security guards, how to sell tickets, all this kind of real world business music experience
Yeah.
that even though I'm not doing that exactly today, I think really helped guide me along, the path to where I am today.
Yeah, it kind of makes you think of the other things. Everyone thinks like we're going to be on stage and going to be rocking out. Everyone's going to be looking at me, but there's all the things behind the scenes that have to be done as well.
Definitely. It's a job for a lot of people. Yeah.
Mm, yeah, and there's a lot of people in the background that rely on you know the artists making money. So people like engineers and producers, security, all the rest of it. And
Definitely. And
so
I live
in
here in Los Angeles, so that's a big part of, the culture here and a lot of folks that work in, the music and the film industries here.
so in 2010, you founded No Ego Records, which is a cracking title for a record company, by the way, to sort of to help promote and release your own music and that of other artists as well. Tell us of the challenges you faced in getting, getting that material and those artists like yourself discovered and noticed and stuff.
Yeah. It feels like a lifetime ago, but I started this record label shortly after I graduated from university because I was making music. I was really into, going to shows and listening to all kinds of music. And I had friends that were also making music and the music sounded great and there was nobody listening to it. They would put it on SoundCloud and, get 10 streams or, 100 streams and they'd celebrate. And I thought, this is crazy. There's so much potential here. And so I started the label with the name No Ego Records intentionally so that the focus is on the music. Like these were no name, like independent artists that no one's heard of, but as long as the music was good, it would, motivate people to listen to it and help build a fan base. And what we learned is that there's more to just producing good music, right? Like you have to be able to
Yeah,
market it.
absolutely.
Yeah. You have to get it into people's hands for them to even be able to listen to it or press play, make it available in all the places that they're searching for music, get it in the hands of DJs, get it played on the radio, all these things that you don't really think about when you're just in the studio and you want to make music and you want to,
Yeah,
have the greatest sound and focus on the mixing and mastering that is just one part of like making a music product that's going to resonate with a wider audience. And so the challenge we
yeah,
ran into, kind of what I was getting into earlier, is there was a lot of these middlemen type services that would offer the world and promise that they're going to get us played by big DJs or on the radio or all these things, and then nothing happens or they send us one report about some emails they sent and then no further follow-up. And it was very frustrating to the point where it led me to think there's got to be a better way. I can use my background in technology to try to cut out the middleman, build this same sort of system that these promoters were using and charging me a fortune for, but I can do it for free or for a do it yourself system. And that's what ultimately that pain that led me to start DropTrack.
so tell us a little bit more about your career as an artist yourself. Have you done kind of like where did that obviously start from? Going from before, you played piano, clarinet, and trumpet in the band. How did it progress from there?
It's a good question. So I think I started producing electronic music in college and university or shortly after. I got Ableton back when it was on version 5, which is telling how old I am. And I also decided to enroll in an audio engineering program after I graduated university, sort of like a vocational training school for people that want to mix audio or do film production with sound and mixing and for video games and all sorts of stuff. And it was really a wonderful program. I studied under Roger Nichols, who's a legendary producer of Steely Dan and John Denver
Yeah,
back in the
yeah,
day. And so that's when I really started creating music, working with other artists to produce their music, work on really like the craft of arrangement and mixing and mastering. I have my own personal artist project. It's called Really Cute Cats. If you want to look on Spotify or SoundCloud, I'm now working on another artist project with a singer friend of mine. We're going to put out some new tracks later this year. So again, music is something I've always been passionate about, and creating music is something that I'm going to keep doing, throughout my whole life.
good, good. That sounds good to me. Right. So, who would you say are your influences in music, tech, and business?
Interesting. In music, tech, and
Yeah,
business. Music, I'm gonna, the first person that comes to mind is like a Quincy Jones, right? Someone who is, quintessential producer, able to get the ultimate performance out of so many different genres of music and really create, a lasting impression for generations. I love that.
yeah.
Business, business. There's so many good people to reference. I'm going to go with Warren Buffett. Just again, top of mind, legendary investor, obsessed with value and not writing trends and understanding the fundamentals of economics. That I think is very powerful.
Philanthropist as well.
Definitely, yes. And then
Yeah, this is important.
what was the last one?
Tech, yeah,
Tech influence. I think I'm going to go with Paul Allen, the co-founder of
okay,
Microsoft. So he,
yeah,
I just read his biography, and it was, fascinating the life that this guy went through, the companies he helped start, the basketball teams, and stuff in the Seattle that he was obsessed with, and all the sports stuff. He helped create ESPN. So just, learning about people like this is motivating to me. If they can build these big businesses and help so many people and transform lives at a tremendous scale, why not me? It's really, an inspiration.
yeah. But make sure you take all the credit for it because he started Microsoft. Bill Gates gets all the credit.
True, but Paul Allen, he got the money also, so that's okay.
He's probably, yeah, I don't think he's complaining too much. Right, a random question for you now. If you could save 5 different records by 5 different artists from a burning building, which 5 would you choose?
Okay,
That's, I think that's what they call a curveball.
yeah. If I can even name 5 records that, yeah, I think like Daft Punk Discovery is one that I'm going to treasure forever. The Miles Davis, like Some Kind of Blue, some jazz.
Yeah,
There's a record that I have that my dad gave to me that is a like Beethoven's Fifth Symphony recording from the London Symphony Orchestra that he had from the 60s. So I would keep that one. Let's see. One of my all-time favorite electronic albums, Cascade, the Dynasty album, I believe. And then let's see, one more. I'm going to go with Jay-Z, The Blueprint Volume 2. So just wide array of genres all over the place, gives you a sense of my musical taste.
yeah. It's a good eclectic mix. Right, so you work for some pretty big tech companies like Apple, Beats by Dre, Ticketmaster, Live Nation, among others. What were your experiences like with these companies?
You know, Yeah, throughout my career in technology, I've worked for, startups, big companies. I've had my own startups,
Yeah,
like, we've been talking about. But the common trend among all of my positions has really been about using what I know about technology to help others improve their lives or empower others at a big scale. So, when I worked at, ZipRecruiter as a technology company, helped, to help people get jobs. I worked at Thrive Market, a company to help people get affordable organic groceries, even if they don't live next to a big grocery store like a Whole Foods. At Ticketmaster, I had some unfortunate timing working there right at the beginning of the pandemic, and got to see what the insides of that machine looks like when their business pivoted from selling tickets all of a sudden to rescheduling or postponing or canceling and giving refunds, and how to
Wow.
interact with, customer service and, customers at a large scale. When I was at Apple and Beats by Dre, we were building, hardware and the Beats headphones and the Beats Pill speakers, and, the interconnectedness of global supply chains. I learned a lot about how you can ship something from a factory in China and have it match up with software that's assembled somewhere else. And, somehow everything, works well and is on time, and you can sell, billions of dollars worth of product. So the scale that some of these companies operate at, and the learnings that I was able to
Huge.
take from them and apply it to my own business is,
Yeah.
inconsequential, and something that I, definitely learned a lot from that experience, and connected a lot also with people that I learned from and that have been mentors, throughout my
Yeah.
career in the tech side as well as music.
So you made quite a lot of strong relationships there.
Definitely. Yes. Yeah. And, I've lived in Los Angeles now for 20 years, and I work in technology, and, there's some amount of tech workers here, but it's more close knit than like in the Bay Area where everybody works in tech.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, I've
Yeah.
definitely, appreciated the network and the community here in tech.
Yeah. Great. So were they quite progressive places to work in terms of finding new ways of doing things, embracing new technologies and that kind of thing?
I would say overall, yes. I mean, these companies that I worked with in particular were largely, innovating and creating new opportunities. When I worked at GitHub, I was on the product team for their Copilot product, which is the AI assisted developer tool that is, taking over the world and is, the hot thing that everyone's using. And so again, just the scale, the innovation, the new technologies that I was exposed to and learning about. DropTrack, my company, uses AI in ways to help musicians. I know there's a lot of fear about, AI in the world, but what I've learned in, my tech background, I want to use to, again, empower musicians, help people advance their career using the technology instead of having AI replace them, which is, I know
Yeah.
there's a lot of fear about that. But certainly what I've learned about technology and, going forward, the AI stuff in particular at these big technology companies who are paving the way, literally inventing the technology for us, is definitely, something that has been progressive, yet to say the least.
Good. So going back to sort of the more musical artist side of it, what do you think are the main concerns facing an independent artist today?
Well, there's kind of the traditional concerns of how do I get my music heard? How do I get people to care about me? How do I make a living doing this? If that's, something that is what you're trying to do. And then the sort of newer concerns about AI, about copyright, about their likeness or music being used to generate somebody else's music, about being drowned out through the sea of AI generated slop or, other content that's out there. These are all kind of more modern concerns that, artists should maybe think about.
Yeah, definitely. Which kind of brings us on to the next question, which is about the genesis of DropTrack, the platform that you've come up with. Sort of tell us a bit more about how that sort of took form and how it took shape.
Yeah. So again, back to my experience running a independent record label, trying to get our what I thought was really good music heard by more people and, really build fan bases. What I learned was that I could build a software tool that helped me get the music in the hands of people who already had a big audience. These are industry
Yeah,
influencers, people like DJs, record labels, today Spotify playlist curators, bloggers, journalists, music supervisors, the people that decide to put your music in a film or TV show. And so instead of my thesis was, instead of trying to go after fans one by one and try to get, the thousand true fans, or, hold a clipboard at shows and get people to sign up, which, wonderful strategy, but it's not going to move the needle in like a significant way that going after an influencer, somebody who already has an audience, getting them to champion your music and spread it, already give, that vote of confidence to their listeners or fan base to sort of rubber stamp and say, I support this new artist as well. It's so much more powerful. And so DropTrack was built on that philosophy, and that if you can get your music in front of DJs, you can understand when they're interacting with it, be able to follow up with them, intelligently, pitch them, new, versions of your tracks, the full catalog, there's a lot of, you know, cases where when I was starting, like you have some contacts, like you know who you're reaching out to. These consultants that I was hiring, they have their list of DJs. And what we learned over time after I started this and you know, it worked, as I mentioned earlier, to get my music placed on some TV shows, some movies, is that not everyone has those list of contacts. And so when I started this as a real product, I thought, okay, everyone's just going to upload their list of email contacts and use this tool to send their music and have all the tracking and it'll be wonderful. And the feedback I got, you know, pretty early on from these initial beta testers and early customers was, well, what if I don't have contacts? How do I find the right DJs? How do I find the right record labels, the best opportunities to submit my music? And that's when we really built this, you know, directory concept where now you can go to DropTrack and browse, you know, in London, DJs that are doing hip hop music and find people based on your specific style and sound and other criteria that are likely to, you know, accept your music and champion it for you. And then throughout the years of running DropTrack, we learned even more from customers as we're building this that they just don't want to do the promotion. They want somebody else to do it for them. They want to be, you know, their focus, their joy of being a musician is in the studio, crafting music or on stage performing. They don't want to become an expert in marketing or social media or advertising. They just want somebody else to do it for them. And so that's when we introduced our done for you service, which I mentioned earlier is kind of a high touch agency type business where we almost act like a PR agent for you on behalf, identify the customer's goals, whether it's, you know, playlist placement, getting played on the radio, sync licensing, and then we work on an individual strategy to execute on those goals and really help the unique, you know, vision of the artist or the label that we're working with. So that's kind of, you know, over time, we've been building DropTrack, adding functionality to it to make the lives of musicians and labels easier. In the past couple of years, we've been really excited about AI technology and how we can use this again to help musicians, not necessarily displace them, but we've added capabilities where you can now upload your track and we'll generate a press release for you. So, you know, we can explain in words what your music sounds like. We can compare it to similar artists and really get somebody to read and understand why they want to press play and listen to your song in the first place. So powerful. We have AI submission matching, where again, based on what your song sounds like and other successful like songs that have been signed to record labels or played on the radio, we can match you with specific opportunities based on just the characteristics of what your song sounds like without you having to go browse a directory or search for keywords. And then lately, we've also innovated and added a music analyzer, which this to me is the most, you know, the coolest thing we've done lately, because we've heard from a lot of customers and people over the years that like, I'm spending a lot of money on music promotion or I'm spending all this time and I'm not getting results. And then what we came to find is that the music just wasn't ready in the first place. Like it wasn't polished, it wasn't commercial sounding, it didn't match similar artists or similar songs in the genre that they were going for. And so it just kind of falls flat when you start promoting it. And so now we've introduced a music analyzer to stop, you know, to help musicians understand when their song is ready or when it needs some more work and give some really actionable advice to help improve the song and then get it ready to promote, you know, to a broader audience. I know I just covered a whole bunch of features, but you got me really excited.
Good, it's good, it's good.
Of where DropTrack came from and now all the cool stuff that we're doing and enabling for musicians and labels that we're working.
I was actually using it earlier today to the track analyzer you were just talking about to analyze one of my songs, and it was quite accurate.
Awesome.
It was really good. I was really surprised. It scored quite highly. I mean, I was quite surprised because it was just literally me singing with the guitar, and I was thinking that's quite high. But I was really impressed with it. Really.
Well, I'm glad that the feedback was useful. We're continually working to improve, you know, the quality and the output, the scores. But yeah, it's something that has been resonating really well with independent artists. So I'm glad you tried it and it worked for you.
That's great. That's great. Right. So talking of AI, how do you feel about the rise of AI?
So, you know, throughout my career, I have kind of been at this intersection of business and music and technology. And I am, you know, at heart an optimist about technology. And I think it is very powerful and transforming humanity, empowering people to do things that we could never do before. And I think AI is just kind of the next extension and evolution of that. And it's also not entirely new. As, you know, I'm sure or maybe other people have talked about, like even in music production, using AI for things like pitch correction, like auto tune, or mixing and mastering, like the Ozone plugins from Isotope, has been around for a long time at this point, and there hasn't been this level of backlash about the technology. It's only now that we're talking about generative AI and the ability of a Chat GPT or something to create an entire song from scratch, or use Suno to generate songs without ever picking up an instrument, that then you could potentially get put on Spotify, or taking up valuable listening time from real human artists, right? So as I mentioned those concerns earlier, these are real things that we're having to sort through. I am, overall, I'm optimistic that this will be a net benefit for humanity and for the music, business and musicians and music listeners overall. But it is kind of like the Wild West right now, where people are still figuring things out. Governments are trying to regulate or understand, like, how could they enforce any sort of regulations about AI. There's a lot of ideas right now, and I would just keep this open mind, trying new technologies, trying to understand what they can do and how they can help you, and not just shunning them or being a Luddite, or being afraid of something new because you might be scared of it. So that's my general take on it.
I think people need to be aware it's all about having a balance, about using it correctly, making sure that it's there to empower what you're trying to do at the end of the day, rather than having the tail wagging the dog, as we say in the UK, where where the AI is doing all the work, and you get barely any input. So yeah, it's kind of, people need to see its benefits and outweigh the negatives.
Yeah, I think, just also understanding a little bit about how these AI systems work, and the fact that, as you just kind of alluded, they're never going to create something totally original, because they're based on the training data of what has come before. And so there is tremendous value in music and art and, almost every other medium of originality. And that's where human artistry is going to continue to be in high demand, and valued and prized. Even if we also have AI that's making music, there's always going to be that desire for something like raw, emotional, human, relatable, that just by definition the AI is not able to create.
Yeah. Yeah. So with AI, do you think it's important to keep its rise in check, to ensure that it's made only to benefit its users rather than to exploit them? And like, kind of, how do you think that can be achieved?
Yeah, that's a tough question, and to be honest, I don't know that it's enforceable, right? Like, I don't know
Yeah.
that governments can really put in policy in order to rein in AI systems that are worldwide and don't have geographic borders. And just technologically, that's going to be a very hard challenge. So I'm not optimistic that there's going to be regulation that comes in and solves it. So to me, then, in my like business sense, it has to be kind of a market led, or economic incentive that solves this, or where the best platform that figures out the best way to compensate or treat artists and their content fairly wins out, and that's the one that attracts the most attention. And so I think that's what'll happen. Whether it's one of the existing like big streaming services or something entirely new, hard to say. But I would not, the way things are going, think that like big tech companies are going to do anything about this themselves. And I don't think that governments are like really empowered to rein it in, or try to enforce any sort of regulation. So
Yeah.
again, I'm optimistic, but I think to answer your question, should the technology be used for good and not for exploiting? Yes. Is that possible to actually enforce? I don't think so. And so we just need to be prepared for, whichever reality, comes about.
Yeah. And we've got to be careful with the way that we use it, as always. So tell us a bit more about some of the artists and producers, etc., that you've worked with on DropTrack. Give them a little bit of a shout out. And
Yeah. So we've worked with, artists in many genres. One case study that, I always like to reference is a singer-songwriter in Louisiana called Louisiana Claude. He is a Americana, like folk artist, who
yeah,
was, putting out a bunch of, new music on Spotify that were getting, a few streams here or there. And he's playing some local shows, but didn't really have a big enough presence to get booked at bigger shows, and wasn't really happy with his Spotify track record. So he came to us through our Done For You service, and we worked with him to really strategize what his goals were, growing his Spotify fan base, getting booked to play bigger shows, and really spreading his Americana message, to a broader audience. And one of the first things that we worked with on him was the release cadence. He was simply putting out too much content, too many songs, without giving them room to breathe, or like room to promote the music, follow up, get it, make sure that people have had time to listen to it. He was just bombarding people with, new music, multiple times a day even. And so,
Really?
we worked with him to simplify the release cadence, and ultimately we're able to grow his Spotify, listeners, and we got him something like 20,000 streams in 1 month, within
Wow.
of working with us. And again, these are not bot listeners. These are like authentic humans that are interested in his music, that are following him, and attuned to whatever he's doing next. And it's also helped him now get booked at bigger venues in the South, in America, so that he's able to perform for larger audiences. So that's definitely a case study I'll reference. Another one is an artist, electronic pop artist named XLI. I don't want to mispronounce this, so that's how you
So like,
you spell it. And we worked with him again to grow his Spotify listener base. I don't know the current numbers, but many thousands of monthly listeners, and increasing his fan base over time. This has allowed him to help break into the American market, coming from overseas. That was one of his goals, is to break into the American listeners, and we helped him achieve that, as well as grow the Spotify listeners. So that I give you an Americana example, an electronic pop artist. We work with like gospel artists, hip hop, country, certainly electronic, house music, techno, all over the board. And we work with labels in all of these spaces as well. Primarily, with electronic and hip hop, just because of, they're the most popular genres in America. But we've been working a lot with K-pop recently. We've had, like Afro house has been, popular over the past couple of years, and there's a number of, labels that specialize in that. So we want to work with musicians that are, passionate about making great music, and that there is an audience for it, whether it's my favorite cup of tea or like the music I would listen to. Doesn't really matter, as long as the music is resonating with the audience, and there's some degree of commercial potential for it.
yeah, definitely. Right. So finally, now that DropTrack is properly established, where do you see yourself and the platform in 10 years?
I've been building this for about 10 years at this point, and I have no plans of stopping. The company keeps growing. We are helping more and more musicians and labels every day, and we're hearing success stories like the ones I mentioned, or people get their songs played on the radio or get signed to a label, and that really motivates me to keep going. So I have a small team that I've grown, throughout the years, and the business gives me the flexibility to live the life I want, and still make music, and have time for fun and everything else. And so I'm excited to keep growing and helping more and more musicians over the next 10 years.
Brilliant. So have you got any more kind of ambitions to expand somehow, possibly into different sectors of the creative arts, like maybe podcasts?
It's funny. I was talking to another podcaster recently, and he asked the same thing. And I had to think about it, because certainly there are opportunities to move into different media verticals, and podcasting is very close to the music and the audio format. There are some engineering channels, just like the longer format audio.
Yeah.
Some of the AI systems in particular we've built, we would have to think really hard about what that means to have long running audio that we process in the same sort of way. But it's not out of the question. There's also something to be said for focus, and like we're not done with growing the market in musicians, and
Yeah.
certainly not in the United States, and not globally. And bifurcating, or adding support for other verticals could be a distraction. So as a small business, it's just something that we have to keep thinking about, and think about what is the best way for us to use our resources to grow the
Yeah.
business.
Yeah. I think that's important. Being able to focus on what you're doing now and who can help now. I think that's pretty important, especially for the musicians.
Also, like I back in the day, in the pandemic, I started a podcast, or I tried to, and I'm sure like a lot of people, you get like 2 episodes into it, and then you realize how much work it is, and you give up. And so I am
No.
not like the perfect target customer of a podcaster. I would have to learn a lot from folks like you in order to make the most valuable product. Whereas coming from the music background, running a label, I clearly felt the pain points that, those folks go
Yeah.
through to help me build DropTrack. And I still, use it. I'm the number one customer. And so I'm feeling any friction and continually working to improve the product based on that experience. And podcasting, like many other, people ask, why don't you get into video, or YouTube promotion, things like that. Same sort of thing. It's just focus. It has been the name of the game so far.
Yeah. Right. And that brings us nicely to the end of the interview. Have you enjoyed being on?
Wonderful. Thank you, Martin. These are great questions, hopefully
Thank you.
helpful to your listeners and your audience about
Yeah.
hearing my story and how, my company DropTrack can help them to grow their audience and their fan base.
I think your inbox might start to become quite full after I post this out,
Love it.
which is a good thing.
Yes.
So what's next in the immediate future for both yourself and DropTrack?
So as I mentioned, DropTrack, we are really excited about AI technology and how we can use it to help musicians, not replace them, but to help them do things more efficiently or do things in ways that they weren't able to do before, or they needed to hire a team or take weeks of time to do. So look forward to us, coming out with a whole bunch of new capabilities that are, again, aimed at empowering musicians with AI, not replacing them, and hopefully giving people, an understanding of how this technology can help them and continuing to help more musicians, especially around the world. For me personally, I'm excited about an upcoming trip to Spain. I'm going to see the solar eclipse that goes through Barcelona. It's a magical experience if you've never seen an eclipse, and I would highly recommend that. But that's what's next for me and the business.
Great. Sounds good to me. Right. So how can people reach DropTrack online? What's the website and all the rest of it?
So I would definitely start droptrack.com. That is the place to find us. We're on all the different social media. You can reach out to our support team. If you have any questions, we'll get right back to you. We're very responsive. And we also have a great YouTube channel with a lot of resources and videos on how you can use DropTrack to promote your music, some of the new AI tools that I talked about. And lastly, I'm always happy to chat with musicians to strategize about the best ways that we can use technology and our resources to help grow their career. So if you're interested in our Done For You service that I mentioned, we have an application on our website where we'll go through, listen to your music, see if it's a good fit, and then set up the next steps to have a strategy meeting. So happy to connect with folks and help your listeners that are musicians themselves get their music heard by more and more people.
Amazing. Well, once I've edited this, I will post all the links to the website and people can get in contact with yourself. Right. And if you like the beautiful chaos of the Sound Like Us podcast, please hit the like, follow, share, subscribe button on Instagram, Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and all the other ones that are out there, etc., to help support the music underground and to support musicians, venues, etc., and new startups like DropTrack. And independent podcasts like me, get our stuff out there. The Sound Like Us podcast merch store is now live. Please check us out at soundlikeus.myshopify.com. Finally, to play us out, would you like to introduce the track, Paul?
Well, yeah, this is a track called Chit Chat from an artist, General Moses, who's on my label, No Ego Records. It's kind of a upbeat, fun tech house track. Hope you like it.
Absolutely, right. So I will get that added in. Finally, I just want to say a massive thanks to Paul Loeb of DropTrack. I really appreciate you coming on today, thousands of miles away in sunny Los Angeles. Real pleasure having you on today.
Thanks for having me, Martin. I enjoyed it.
No worries. I have to do it again very soon. Paul, take care.
Cheers.
Check it out. Life's too short, I ain't here to chit chat now. I ain't here to chit chat. it out. Life's too short, I ain't here to chit chat. Check it out. This, yeah, you like that. Everybody in 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 this, yeah, you like that. Everybody, I ain't here to chit chat. Too short, I ain't here to chit chat. This, yeah, you like that. Everybody knows that I ain't about that. Soon as I land, I'ma get these bands. Life's too short, I ain't here to chit chat. Mic check 1, 2. What you gonna do? Mic check 1, 2. Now what you gonna? Nah, nah. This, yeah, you like that. Everybody knows that I ain't about that. Soon as I land, I'ma get these bands. Life's too short, I ain't here to chit chat. Mic check 1, 2. What you gonna do? Mic check 1, 2. Now what you gonna? Chit chat.